The silence in Ethan Caldwell's study was shattered by the sound of his voice, each word slicing through the air like a whip. "Get this lying trash out of my house before I have you arrested for extortion." The mahogany-paneled walls seemed to vibrate with his fury, his words echoing in a room that had once felt like a sanctuary to Sophia Hart. Just hours ago, she had lain in his arms, his lips pressed against her throat, his whispers soft and intimate in the darkness. Now those same lips twisted in a sneer, his tone venomous enough to annihilate what remained of her foolish heart. Sophia stood frozen in the doorway, her silk nightgown clinging to her trembling body, the flimsy garment a cruel reminder of how he had worshipped her only hours before. In her hand, the small stick trembled, the positive pregnancy test, the proof of the life growing inside her, the proof of their connection. She held it like a fragile offering, but his eyes saw nothing sacred in it. His piercing blue gaze, once filled with heat and tenderness, now burned with contempt so sharp it made her sick. "Ethan, please," she tried, her voice breaking. "Just listen to me." Listen to what? He moved from behind his massive oak desk, his tall frame towering, his movements deliberate, predatory. "More lies, more schemes to trap me. Do you have any idea who I am? What my family is worth? You think this pathetic little stunt will work?" Her legs threatened to give out beneath her. 8 months. 8 months of whispered promises, secret touches, nights filled with a love she believed was real. 8 months of risking everything to be with him. "The baby is yours, Ethan," she whispered desperately. "You know it is. We've been together since—" He cut her off, his laugh low and cruel, twisting in her chest like a knife. "That's all this ever was. A wealthy man amusing himself with the maid. Did you actually ally believe it meant something more?" His words cracked through her like thunder. The contempt was total, his mask of tenderness stripped away. She remembered every moment he had grown distant over the past weeks, every time his father criticized his decisions, every mocking remark from his friends about him, keeping the help in their place. She had ignored the warning signs, clinging to his apologies, to the kisses that promised something she now realized was only a convenient illusion. "You said you loved me," she whispered, her tears burning hot down her cheeks. "I say a lot of things when I'm trying to get between a woman's legs," he shot back, his voice cold, his eyes merciless. Sophia clutched the test tighter, her knuckles white, as he circled her like a predator stalking weak prey. His suit was immaculate, his presence radiating control, while she stood disheveled and vulnerable, love crumbling inside her like ash. "You're a housekeeper," he said, his tone final, absolute. "A nobody. I'm Ethan Caldwell. We don't have babies together. We don't have relationships. We don't have anything." Her voice cracked into silence, the truth of his cruelty suffocating her. But nothing. He pulled out his phone, dismissing her existence with a flick of his hand. "There's a clinic downtown that handles this sort of thing. I'll give you $5,000 to disappear. Consider it compensation for services rendered." His thumb moved across the screen, already dialing. "Security. Now." Sophia reached for him, desperation pulling her forward. "Ethan, please, don't touch me." He recoiled as if her hand carried disease, his eyes glacial. "And don't ever speak my name again. As of this moment, you don't work here. You don't know me. You never knew me." Heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. 2 guards entered, men who had once joked with her in the kitchen, now expressed, sionless, professional. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Her world tilted, but she forced herself to lift her chin, forced her voice to steady though her heart was in pieces. "I want you to remember this moment," she said softly, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "I want you to remember the way you looked at me, the way you threw me away. Because someday, Ethan Caldwell, you're going to regret it. You'll regret everything." For the briefest instant, his eyes flickered, something raw, something almost human. Regret? Doubt? It vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the mask of disdain. "Get her out of here." The guards escorted her away. The mansion's heavy doors slammed behind her with an echo that felt like a verdict. She stood on the steps, cold night air searing her lungs, the test still clenched in her fist. Her tears froze on her cheeks, but deep inside, something else ignited. A flame born of pain, betrayal, and rage. He thought he had broken her. He thought she was nothing. But as she walked away, the shattered girl began to harden into something else, something stronger. Ethan Caldwell had no idea that tonight, in discarding her, he had created the very weapon of his own destruction. Rain hammered on the cracked windshield of Sophia's old Honda as she sat in a deserted parking lot, her hands wrapped tightly around the steering wheel as if it could hold her broken world together. 2 months had passed since Ethan Caldwell threw her out like she was nothing, and each day since had dragged her further into the abyss. The heater had long since died, the vents blowing nothing but icy air that cut into her bones. She pulled her thin coat tighter, but it was no match for December's brutal cold. Her stomach growled, a vicious cramp reminding her she had eaten nothing but stale crackers and tap water for days. She pressed a hand against her belly, feeling the small swell beneath her coat, a reminder, though, that she was no longer just fighting for herself. She had counted the money in her wallet 3 times already, $4,316. It was everything she had left, a mix of her savings, the last paycheck she had managed to collect before Ethan poisoned her name, and coins scavenged from the floorboards of the car. She thought of the warmth of the Caldwell mansion, of the food served on fine china she had once been allowed to taste in secret corners of the kitchen. That world was gone, ripped away with a single cruel command, and now she was the one outsiders looked at with suspicion. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She grabbed it with trembling fingers, hope flaring, only for it to crash seconds later. Another rejection. Thank you for your application. Position filled. The 15th that week. Ethan had made sure of it. His lies spread through every polished dining hall and charity gala, whispers planted in the ears of those who mattered. That maid tried to trap Ethan Caldwell with a fake pregnancy. Don't touch her. She's poison. Sophia bit down on her lip until she tasted blood. Fake. The word burned through her. Nothing about this child was fake. The life fluttering inside her was the only real thing left, the only proof of a love she had once believed in. She still had the medical records, the clinic's blood tests that confirmed it beyond doubt. But what did truth matter in a world where power bent perception until lies became accepted fact? A knock startled her. A flashlight beam cut through the fog of her window, and she rolled it down with frozen fingers. A security guard leaned in, his face weary but not unkind. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here. Store policy. You need to move along." His voice carried the weight of a man who had said this too many times to too many broken souls. Sophia swallowed hard. "Please, just until morning. I won't cause trouble, I promise." The guard's eyes dropped to her swollen belly, then to the exhaustion carved into her face. For a moment, his resolve cracked. "Look, there's a shelter south on Route 9. Try there. Maybe they can help." He walked away before she could explain she had already been there, already been turned away twice with promises of 6-month waiting lists. She started the car, the engine coughing like it was ready to die, and pulled back onto the road. Headlights swept across the wet pavement, but her vision blurred as tears welled up. She had been naive to think Ethan might have been shocked, but happy at her news, that he would have held her, promised to take care of her and their child. Instead, he had tried to erase them both with money and cruelty. Now she carried the weight of survival alone. A kick, small but certain, pressed against her hand. Her breath caught. The baby moved again, stronger this time, as if reminding her she wasn't entirely alone. Rage unfurled in her chest, burning hotter than despair. Ethan wanted her gone, invisible, destroyed. But this child was proof she couldn't be erased, proof that what they shared had existed, no matter what lies he told the world. She tightened her grip on the wheel, a spark of resolve cutting through the storm of her grief. If the world wanted to treat her as nothing, then she would rise from nothing into someone they could never ignore. And Ethan Caldwell, the man who threw her away pregnant and homeless, would one day choke on the sight of what she became. The night air bit into Sophia's skin like 1,000 icy needles as she staggered along the slick sidewalk, her body running on fumes. Her boots slipped on patches of frozen slush. Her breath came in ragged bursts that formed pale clouds in the glow of the street lamps. She had walked for hours, as with no destination, desperate to keep moving, terrified that if she stopped she would never start again. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, dizziness blurred her vision, and the ache in her back had turned into sharp jolts with every step. The city around her seemed to mock her suffering. Through the tall windows of the Grand Meridian Hotel spilled golden light, the laughter of the rich echoing faintly into the cold. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above champagne flutes and sequined gowns while she stood outside, shivering, her threadbare coat soaked through with sleet. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering through cracked lips, "Not the baby, please, not the baby." Her legs buckled and the pavement rushed toward her, but strong arms caught her just before she hit the ground. The world tilted, the edges darkened, and she was pulled against a chest that radiated warmth and strength. A voice cut through the haze, deep and commanding. "Christ, she's freezing. Call an ambulance." "No hospital." The words scraped out of her throat, faint but desperate. She tried to push away, her pride refusing to let a stranger see her collapse completely. "Can't afford it. Can't afford to live." The man holding her tightened his grip, his tone shifting from sharp command to something quieter, steadier. "Look at me. Focus. Open your eyes." Through the blur she forced her lids apart and met eyes the color of storm clouds, piercing gray that seemed to see past her walls and straight into the core of her. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an immaculate black coat that clung to him like a second skin. Dark hair streaked with silver framed a face that should have belonged to a magazine cover. But it was not his wealth or looks that rooted her. It was the flash of recognition in his gaze, as if he knew what it was to be invisible, discarded, starving for a chance to matter. "When did you last eat?" he asked, cutting through the murmurs of curious onlookers. "Real food, not scraps." "Tuesday." The confession fell from her lips like a stone, and the way his jaw tightened told her he understood the horror of it. He barked another order, and a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. With effortless strength, he lifted her into the warmth of the leather interior, his movements protective rather than possessive. She tried to protest, but his voice silenced her with steel. "I didn't ask for permission. You and your child will not die on this street." She clutched the worn fabric of her coat, trying to form the words, "You don't even know me." The man settled beside her, his eyes never leaving hers. "Gabriel Stone," he said simply, and the name cut through her like a jolt of electricity. She had heard it often, whispered with venom from Ethan's lips, cursed in boardrooms and mocked over late-night brandy. Ethan's rival, the man he hated most. "Why are you helping me?" she managed, suspicion and fear battling against the relief of warmth. "Because I've been where you are." His answer was stripped bare of pretense. 20 years ago I was sleeping under bridges, stealing food just to make it through the night. The only difference between us is that someone gave me a chance. Now I'm giving that to you. Sophia stared at him, her body trembling as IV bags and silk sheets blurred in her vision. A man she had never met, a man her former lover had despised, was the one saving her when Ethan had tried to erase her. A storm raged inside her, fear, gratitude, and a spark of something else she hadn't felt in months. Hope. 8 weeks later. Sophia barely recognized the reflection staring back at her from the full-length mirror in her suite high above the city. Gone was the frail woman who had collapsed on the sidewalk outside the Grand Meridian. Gone was the maid dismissed in humiliation from the Caldwell mansion. In her place stood a woman forged by fire and betrayal, Paulus, head by opportunity and sharpened by rage. Her tailored dress clung to her body with a confidence she had never dared before. The rich charcoal fabric cut to flatter her growing curves while commanding the presence of a boardroom. Her hair flowed in glossy waves instead of hanging limp and tangled. Her skin glowed from proper nourishment, and her eyes, no longer dulled by hunger, burned with calculation. But the transformation went deeper than silk and mirrors. Gabriel Stone had not rescued her to treat her as charity. He had given her purpose, work that demanded every ounce of her skill and intellect. As his executive aide, she was learning the heartbeat of his empire, memorizing contracts, decoding negotiations, and sitting silently in meetings where titans of industry fought for dominance. She absorbed everything, her mind cataloging details like weapons she would one day unleash. Every day she proved she was more than the girl Ethan had discarded. Every day she rose higher. The office that now belonged to her overlooked the skyline like a throne above the kingdom. From her desk, she could see the Caldwell Tower glinting in the distance, a reminder of the man who had destroyed her and the empire that believed she was nothing. She studied that tower daily, promising herself that one day it would crumble just as he had tried to make her crumble. Gabriel entered her office with his usual quiet authority, his presence filling the space before he even spoke. He wore navy today, his silver-touched hair immaculate, but his eyes were what always caught her, storm-gray depths that seemed to see the truth of her, even when she tried to hide it. "Morning," he said as he reached for the tablet she held out. Their fingers brushed in a touch charged with unspoken possibilities. "The Tokyo markets are responding to the merger announcement," she reported, her voice steady and assured. "We're looking at a 15% rise by next quarter." "And Caldwell Enterprises?" she asked, though her tone was carefully neutral. Gabriel's mouth curved in a smile sharp as a blade. "Their lead engineer just accepted our offer. Dr. Walsh and her entire team join Stone Enterprises next week." Sophia's heart thudded with dark satisfaction. Ethan would be furious. She pictured him smashing things in his office, pictured the mask of entitlement cracking as his grip on power slipped. Each blow against his company felt like a fragment of justice, like balancing a scale that had once been shattered. "You're enjoying this," Gabriel observed as he moved closer, his gaze searching her face. "I'm enjoying watching a man who thought he was untouchable finally pay the price," she replied carefully. "Is that all Ethan Caldwell is to you?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "An arrogant man who miscalculated?" "He is a symbol," Sophia answered, meeting his eyes without flinching. "A symbol of everything wrong with men who use their power to destroy and dismiss." Gabriel studied her for a long moment, then looked out the window toward the rival tower. "When I first found you, I thought you were running from something. Now I see you are running toward something. The question is what?" She did not answer. Not yet. Her silence was its own weapon, and his smoldering gaze told her he knew it. That evening when he asked her to have dinner with him, his voice carried more than business. It was a challenge, an invitation, and perhaps the first step into a war that would no longer be fought only in boardrooms, but in hearts as well. The hospital lights glared down like watchful eyes as Sophia screamed through the final wave of pain. Hours of labor had drained every ounce of her strength, but she refused to give in. She had endured hunger, cold, and humiliation. She had survived Ethan Caldwell's cruelty and the streets that wanted to swallow her. She would not falter now. With one last desperate push, the cry of new life pierced the stereo. "L'oir." The sound shattered her and healed her in the same breath. The nurse lifted a tiny wriggling body into Sophia's arms, and the world shifted forever. Her son, warm and fragile against her chest, his tiny hand curled instinctively around her finger with surprising strength, as if to remind her that he had fought too. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered hello through sobs that shook her whole body. She had thought she was broken beyond repair, but this child proved she was still capable of love, fierce and unstoppable. Beside her, Gabriel Stone gripped her hand with knuckles white, his immaculate suit wrinkled from hours in the waiting room chair. His usually polished hair hung loose and damp from sweat, his storm-gray eyes burning with an intensity she had never seen in any man. He had been there for every contraction, every scream, refusing to leave even when the doctors suggested it. Now as he gazed at the baby, his jaw trembled. He looked as if he had been given the world and feared it might be snatched away. "He's beautiful," Gabriel whispered hoarsely, "more beautiful than anything I've ever seen." Sophia turned her head toward him and for the first time saw the cracks in the armor of the billionaire she worked for. There was no empire in his eyes now, only awe and something dangerously close to love. What will you name him? Gabriel asked softly. Sophia brushed her lips against the baby's head. Noah, she whispered. He feels like a Noah. Gabriel's hand tightened around hers. Then Noah Stone, he said firmly. Sophia froze. What are you saying? I want him to have my name, Gabriel said, his voice steady with a conviction that made her heart lurch. I want to be his father in every way that matters, not just in action but in law, in legacy. I want him to grow up with my protection around him and my love as his foundation. Sophia's breath caught. He isn't your blow. Odd. Blood means nothing, Gabriel cut her off. Love makes a father, choice makes a father, and I am choosing him. I am choosing both of you. The room seemed to spin with the force of his words. Ethan Caldwell had denied the child before he had even taken his first breath. Ethan had thrown Sophia away like trash. And now here was his rival, his enemy, kneeling beside her bed as if she were a queen and their son a prince he was ready to claim. Tears spilled from Sophia's eyes as she whispered, "Are you sure?" Gabriel cupped her face in his hands. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The nurse returned to check the monitors, but her presence barely registered. In that moment, Sophia understood that her life had shifted again. The boy in her arms would never know hunger or fear. He would never be treated as unwanted or unloved. He would grow up in safety, in wealth, in power, and most of all, he would grow up cherished by the man who had saved them both. But beneath the joy, a darker truth pulsed. The revelation of Noah's true bloodline still hung over them like a sword. Ethan Caldwell had no idea that the child he had rejected now carried his name into the arms of his greatest rival. And when he learned the truth, the storm would break with a fury none of them could escape. The ocean wind swept across the sprawling estate in the Hamptons as Sophia walked down the aisle, baby Noah cradled in her arms instead of a bouquet. Silk whispered around her legs, pearls glimmered like captured stars, and every step carried the weight of a transformation so profound that even the most jaded eyes in the crowd couldn't look away. The maid who had once scrubbed these same marble floors was now the bride of one of the most powerful men in America. Gabriel waited at the altar, his storm-gray eyes locked only on her. His expression was fierce and tender all at once, a man who he had fought through fire to claim something irreplaceable. When Sophia reached him, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. You look like a queen. She held his gaze and whispered back, I feel like one. The ceremony unfolded with elegance and precision, but beneath the polished surface burned an unspoken war. Every guest understood the subtext. Senators, CEOs, and media magnates raised their glasses, not just to a marriage, but to a declaration. This was not only a union of love, but a merging of power. It was a message to Ethan Caldwell and to every person who had once dismissed Sophia Hart. The woman they had underestimated now stood untouchable. When Gabriel raised his champagne glass at the reception, silence fell like a curtain. 2 years ago, I found my wife collapsed on a city street, pregnant and abandoned by a man too cowardly to claim her. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, sharp and electric. That man's weakness gave me the greatest gifts of my life, Sophia and Noah, and while I should thank him for his stupidity, I'm not that generous. His smile curved like a blade. Instead, I will show him what happens when you discard something precious. Applause thundered, but the message was clear. War had been declared publicly and irrevocably. Sophia moved through the crowd afterward, her posture regal, her smile razor-sharp. Guests who had once looked through her now bowed their heads slightly as she passed, eager to win her favor. Every conversation was a weapon carefully wielded, every laugh a calculated strike. Later that night, when the music faded and the last of the elite drifted away in their limousines, Sophia stood with Gabriel on the terrace. Noah slept peacefully in her arms, the ocean whispering below like a witness to their vows. The city's most ruthless man loosened his tie and leaned into her warmth. We start Monday, Gabriel murmured. 3 bored me. Embers at Caldwell Enterprises are already wavering. One of them will break, and when she does, Ethan's empire will crack open like rotten wood. Sophia's smile was cold and certain. I want him to watch it all crumble. I want him to remember the moment he threw me out like garbage and realize that was the day he signed his own ruin. Gabriel pressed a kiss against her temple. Then we'll give him that memory, together. From the shadows of the terrace, a servant approached with hushed urgency. William Caldwell has requested a meeting, sir. Gabriel's eyes flicked toward Sophia. Ethan's father was no fool. If he was reaching out, the house of Caldwell was already splintering. Sophia tightened her hold on Noah and whispered, "It's time they all learn the maid they dismissed is now the weapon they should have feared." Ethan Caldwell sat hunched over his mahogany desk, the same desk where he had once signed contracts with a swagger of invincibility. Now his hands shook as the newspaper headline glared back at him like a death sentence. Stone Enterprises dominates renewable sector. The photograph beneath it was worse than the headline itself. Gabriel Stone stood with his arm wrapped around a radiant Sophia, their signatures side by side on a government contract worth billions. She wore an emerald suit that caught the light like a crown, and in her arms was Noah, dressed in miniature finery, the image of legitimacy and belonging. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The intercom buzzed with his assistant's nervous voice. "Your father wants to see you immediately." Ethan's stomach dropped. William Caldwell never summoned his son unless disaster was imminent. This was worse than disaster. This was annihilation. The walk to his father's office felt like a march toward execution. William stood by the window when Ethan entered, silver hair gleaming, posture unyielding. "Explain to me how we have lost 5 major contracts to Stone in the last quarter." Ethan stammered something about espionage, about Stone stealing inside information. Iam's laugh was cold and merciless. "Inside information? Or perhaps we've simply been outmatched by a competitor with brains and vision while you cling to outdated strategies." Ethan tried to defend himself, but every word only dug him deeper. His father's eyes burned with fury when he said the name that made Ethan's heart stutter. "Senator Thompson tells me Mrs. Stone handled the negotiations herself. Brilliant, decisive, ruthless. Imagine my shock when I learned she used to work for us." The blood drained from Ethan's face. Sophia Hart. She had been the help, the girl he had dismissed without a second thought. William's voice was low, dangerous. She graduated top of her class from Columbia, managed our household flawlessly, spoke 4 languages, and yet somehow she left without a reference, without explanation. "Tell me, Ethan, why is our former housekeeper now married to the man dismantling our empire piece by piece?" Ethan's throat closed. He muttered excuses, lies, fragments that sounded hollow even to him. William slammed a hand on the desk. "Enough. I built this company with my blood, and you've thrown it into the fire. The board has lost faith. They want a change in leadership, and for once, I agree." Before Ethan could speak, his phone buzzed with a message that shattered the last fragments of his pride. "Caldwell Enterprises stock plummets as board questions leadership." The screen blurred as panic clawed at him. His father's verdict came like a blade. "Until further notice, you are removed from all decision-making. You've proven yourself unfit." As Ethan staggered out of the office, his mind spun with fragments of memory. Sophia's laughter in the kitchen, her body soft in his bed, her eyes shining when she had whispered that she carried his child. He had thrown her out, called her trash, denied her baby. Now she stood beside his greatest rival as wife, as queen, as Ta'ad, a weapon he had forged with his own cruelty. He stared again at the photograph in the paper. Sophia's smile was sharp with triumph, Gabriel's hand claiming her with absolute authority. And Noah, his son, his heir, his blood, held high before the world with another man's name. For the first time, Ethan Caldwell felt the truth crash down on him like a hammer. He hadn't just lost contracts. He hadn't just lost control of his company. He had lost everything that mattered. And the woman he had betrayed was about to teach him how deep the cost of arrogance could cut. The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Club glittered like frozen stars, casting their glow across a ballroom filled with the most powerful men and women in New York. Ethan Caldwell adjusted his black tie with hands that would not stop trembling. His father had ordered him to attend the gala, to show strength, to remind the world that the Caldwell empire still breathed. But Ethan already knew the truth. The empire was crumbling, and tonight he would come face to face with the woman who had lit the match. He spotted her across the room before anyone else. Sophia. His Sophia. Only she was no longer the maid he had dismissed or the desperate girl he had cast into the cold. She was Sophia Stone now, radiant in a gown of emerald silk that clung like liquid fire, her hair swept high to reveal the proud line of her neck. Every senator, every CEO, every financier angled toward her as if she were royalty. And in her arms, dressed in a tiny tuxedo, was Noah, Ethan's son, his blood. The sight nearly brought him to his knees. Noah gazed around the ballroom with bright eyes that mirrored Ethan's own, though he clung protectively to Sophia, his small fingers curled into the folds of her gown. The crowd parted as Gabriel Stone joined her, his presence commanding, his hand resting with quiet possession on the small of her back. Together they looked like a dynasty incarnate, untouchable and absolute. Ethan's fiancée, Isabella Harper, glittered at his side, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. She squealed with delight when she noticed the stones and tugged Ethan forward. "Darling, there they are. I've been dying to meet them." Ethan's legs felt carved from stone as Isabella introduced herself with breathless enthusiasm. "Mrs. Stone, you are even more stunning in person. Everyone says you're the true mind behind Stone Enterprises' success." Sophia's smile was polite, her voice smooth as silk. "How kind of you to say. And you must be Ethan Caldwell." She tilted her head as though studying him for the first time. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." The words sliced through him like a blade. She was erasing their history in front of the entire ballroom, pretending they were strangers. The humiliation burned like acid. Isabella laughed lightly. "Ethan, honestly, how could you forget meeting someone so extraordinary?" Gabriel appeared then, his arm brushing against Sophia's, as if sealing her inside a fortress of protection. "Mr. Caldwell," he said coolly, "I'd like to introduce you to my wife. And my son." He lifted Noah gently into his arms, pressing a kiss to the child's temple. "My son." The possessive words shattered Ethan's last defense. He staggered back a step, choking on rage. "Your son. In every way that matters," Gabriel replied, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "Biology means nothing. Love, protection, commitment, those are the marks of a father." Noah giggled and nestled against Gabriel's chest, calling out Dada with innocent joy. The sound hit Ethan like a physical blow. That single word, spoken with trust and love, tore apart everything he had clung to. Sophia's eyes met his then, blazing with triumph and cold satisfaction. "He does look like his father, doesn't he?" Ethan's mouth went dry. She had gutted him with a smile. The senators and CEOs around them understood every layered meaning, every poisoned truth wrapped in polite conversation. William Caldwell arrived, shaking Gabriel's hand with a respect he had never shown his own son. "Mrs. Stone, our meeting was most enlightening. I look forward to continuing our discussions." Sophia inclined her head graciously. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Different perspectives can indeed reveal hidden truths." Ethan's vision blurred. The world tilted. His father respected her more than him. His rival claimed his child. The maid he had thrown away was now the queen commanding every eye in the room. As Sophia walked away on Gabriel's arm, Noah babbling happily between them, Ethan stood frozen, suffocating on the knowledge that he had lost not just a woman or a company, but an entire kingdom. And the worst part was the way she had looked at him one final time. A smile sharp as glass, promising that this was only the beginning of his ruin. The city sky was bruised with late afternoon clouds when Ethan Caldwell parked his BMW across from the cheerful daycare center with its painted rainbows and paper cutout suns. He had been sitting there for 3 days, memorizing every detail of his son's routine. Drop off at 9, pick up at 3. A tiny window of time where Noah was outside the fortress of stone towers, outside Gabriel's iron grip, exposed and reachable. Ethan's pulse hammered like a war drum as he checked his watch. 12 minutes until pickup. 12 minutes to take back what was his. He stepped out of the car, straightening his wrinkled suit jacket, trying to summon the confidence that used to come so easily. But his empire was gone. His father had stripped him of power, Isabella had fled after the humiliation at the gala, and the board was ready to vote him out completely. All he had left was Noah. The boy was his blood, his heir, the last thread tying him to meaning. He whispered the word like a prayer as he pushed through the daycare doors. The receptionist looked with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" Ethan forced his voice into steady tones. "I'm here for Noah Stone. I'm his uncle. There's been a family emergency." The woman frowned. Mr. and Mrs. Stone didn't mention anyone else would be picking him up. "I'll need to call them." Panic clawed through Ethan's chest. "There's no time. It's his grandmother. She's in the hospital. Sophia asked me to get Noah immediately." He leaned closer, desperation leaking into his voice. "Please, every second counts." Behind the desk, Noah appeared, toddling forward on small legs, his dark hair catching the light. Ethan's heart stopped. The boy was perfect, the living echo of his own bloodline. Noah tilted his head in innocent curiosity. "Daddy," he said, softly, uncertain. The word shattered Ethan. He dropped to his knees, arms open. "Yes, I'm your real daddy. Come to me." But the boy hesitated, his eyes flicking to the receptionist for safety. He clutched her skirt instead. "Sir, you're frightening him," she said firmly. "I really need to make that call." Something inside Ethan snapped. He lunged forward, scooping Noah into his arms. The child screamed instantly, terror flooding the air as tiny fists beat against Ethan's chest. Parents in the lobby turned, alarm written on their faces. "He's my son," Ethan shouted. "My blood. No one can keep me from my own child." The receptionist's voice broke into a scream. "Help! Someone stop him!" Ethan bolted through the doors, Noah thrashing in his grip, his cries echoing down the street like sirens. He shoved the boy into a waiting car seat he had installed that morning with trembling hands. Noah sobbed harder, calling for Mama, calling for Dada, the names that cut Ethan deeper than knives. The BMW roared to life, tires squealing as Ethan pulled into traffic. His phone buzzed on the dashboard. Gabriel Stone's name flashed like a death sentence. With shaking fingers, Ethan answered. "You have exactly 60 seconds to return my son before I end you." Gabriel's voice was pure ice. "He's mine," Ethan shouted over Noah's cries. "He's my son, my blood." "Your blood doesn't make you his father," Gabriel snarled. "Love makes a father. Protection makes a father. You've never given him either." Police sirens wailed behind Ethan, blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror. And worse, Stone Enterprises SUVs appeared from side streets, converging with military precision. Gabriel had unleashed an army. "I just want a chance," Ethan cried. "I can learn. I can be what he needs." "You prove with every second why you don't deserve him." Gabriel's voice was final, deadly. "Pull over now, or you will not survive this." Ethan's hands trembled on the wheel. He looked back at Noah, his son's cheeks streaked with tears, clutching a stuffed bear like a shield, eyes wide with terror. "Daddy's here," Ethan whispered brokenly. "I'll make it right." But the boy only whimpered, "Mama." The road ahead was blocked. Police cruisers and black SUVs hemmed him in. Officers with weapons drawn surrounded the car. Gabriel stepped from his Bentley, Sophia at his side, her face white with fury. "It's over." Ethan Gabriel's voice carried like judgment. "Get out of the car now." Ethan pressed his forehead to the steering wheel, tears spilling unchecked. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the boy who could not understand. Then slowly he turned off the engine and raised his hands. As officers dragged him out, Ethan's eyes locked on Sophia holding Noah tight, the child instantly soothed in her embrace. "Mama," the boy sobbed. "Bad man gone." Sophia kissed his hair fiercely. "Mama's here. Mama will never let anyone hurt you again." Gabriel's arms wrapped around both of them, sealing Ethan's defeat with a circle of protection he could never breach. In the distance, camera flashes exploded, reporters capturing every second. By nightfall, the entire city would know. The heir of Caldwell Enterprises had fallen so low he tried to steal his own son in broad daylight. The Caldwell estate loomed again, against the night sky, its Gothic towers and marble steps, the same as when Sophia had once polished its floors on her knees. But now she stepped from a Rolls-Royce in a gown that shimmered like liquid moonlight, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly, where Gabriel's twins grew strong. Noah skipped ahead, 3.5 years old now, his laughter echoing across the stone courtyard. To him, this was no longer the Caldwell mansion. It was the Stone Kingdom. Gabriel appeared beside her, his arms secure around her waist, his eyes scanning the estate with the quiet dominance of a man who knew he owned it now. William Caldwell was dead from a sudden heart attack, the stress of his collapsing empire finally too heavy to bear. Ethan languished in prison after his desperate kidnapping attempt, stripped of his fortune and reputation, his name whispered in boardrooms as a warning rather than a legacy. Margaret Caldwell, once the haughty matriarch, now stood waiting at the door in a plain uniform, reduced to the housekeeper under Sophia's command. "Welcome home, Mrs. Stone," she murmured, bowing her head. Sophia let the words settle like music. Home. The place that had once been her cage was now her throne. She smiled coldly at Margaret and swept past her into the grand foyer. The marble floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the portraits of Caldwell ancestors stared down with frozen eyes, powerless to stop what had become of their dynasty. Noah tugged at her gown, his small voice filled with awe. "Mama, this castle is ours." Sophia knelt, kissing his dark curls. "Yes, baby. It's all ours now, and no one will ever take it from us." That night, the dining hall filled with senators, CEOs, and foreign dignitaries. It was not merely a dinner, it was a coronation. Sophia presided at Gabriel's side, her presence commanding, her beauty sharpened by the knowledge of victory. Every guest who looked upon her saw not a former maid, but a queen, a woman who had risen from ashes to sit at the head of empires. She lifted her glass, her voice steady and rich with power. To building futures, to protecting what others once thought disposable, to knowing true worth. The guests applauded, but Sophia's eyes were fixed on the far end of the table, where Margaret poured wine with trembling hands. Every movement was a reminder of the reversal. The woman who had once looked through her as if she were invisible now survived only by her mercy. Justice had never tasted sweeter. Later, as moonlight spilled across the gardens, Sophia stood with Gabriel on the balcony, overlooking the sea. Noah slept peacefully inside, guarded by security, his dreams untroubled by the man who had abandoned him. Sophia felt Gabriel's hands on her shoulders, his voice low against her ear. "It is finished. The Caldwells are no more." She turned in his embrace, her eyes glinting with triumph. Not finished. Completed. Ethan Caldwell thought he destroyed me when he cast me out. But he built me. His betrayal forged my strength. His cruelty gave me fire. His rejection handed me into the arms of the man who would love me as I deserved. "And what of him?" Gabriel asked, though his tone already carried the answer. Sophia's smile was cold, almost merciful. "He lives. But he lives knowing he lost not just a company or a fortune. He lost the love that could have saved him. He lost his son. He lost his future. And he will watch the rest of his life as I flourish with everything he threw away. That is punishment enough." The waves crashed below like applause. Gabriel kissed her, slow and certain, sealing their reign. In the master bedroom that had once belonged to Ethan's parents, Sophia later stood before the mirror. She touched the curve of her stomach, felt the lives within her move, and whispered a vow. "You will grow up never doubting your worth, never begging for love. You will inherit a world I carved from pain and built with fire." From the doorway, Gabriel watched her with reverence. "You are my empress," he said softly, "and this is your empire." Sophia Hart, once discarded as nothing, had become Sophia Stone, a woman untouchable, unstoppable, unforgettable. She had been thrown out pregnant and humiliated, but now she stood at the pinnacle, the wife of a millionaire rival, the mother of heirs, the queen of a kingdom rebuilt in her image. Far away in a prison cell, Ethan Caldwell sat alone, staring at a crumpled newspaper photo of Sophia, radiant in victory. Tears streaked his face as he whispered her name, a sound swallowed by silence. He had lost her forever, and with her, everything else. And as the night deepened around the estate now renamed Stone Manor, Sophia lay in Gabriel's arms with Noah asleep beside them and the future growing within her. She knew the truth with perfect certainty. Some betrayals destroy, but the right betrayal transforms. She had been broken once, but never again.